The shadows in the park. It was a warm, golden afternoon, and the neighborhood park buzzed with life. The trees swayed gently, their leaves whispering with the wind, while children's laughter echoed through the air like a sweet melody. The sun, hanging high in the sky, cast long shadows across the bustling playground, where kids raced and played without a care in the world. Among them was Tyrell, a quiet and observant 12-year-old boy who never missed a beat. Tyrell wasn't your average kid. Sure, he enjoyed riding his bike, hanging out with his friends, and practicing tricks on his worn-out BMX, but there was something else about him. Something that made him different. Tyrell had a deep sense of awareness, a way of noticing things others might overlook. It was as though he could see through the surface of a situation and feel when something wasn't quite right. That particular afternoon, this instinct was about to be put to the test. He pedaled slowly along the winding path, his eyes scanning the park. Families were spread out on blankets, enjoying picnics, while toddlers ran after bubbles that floated through the air. The swings creaked as they flew back and forth, and the unmistakable sounds of joy filled the space. Tyrell felt a sense of peace, but something nagged at him. His gut told him to stay alert, and he trusted it. As he made his way past the playground, Tyrell noticed a little girl standing alone near the jungle gym. She couldn't have been more than 5 years old, with pigtails and a bright pink dress that seemed far too clean for someone her age. She was holding a stuffed bunny, clutching it tightly to her chest. Her face was scrunched up in confusion, her eyes darting around the park as though she were searching for someone. Tyrell's instincts kicked in immediately. Something was off. He circled around slowly, keeping his distance but not taking his eyes off the girl. His mind raced with questions. Why was she alone? Where were her parents? He could tell she was scared, and his heart went out to her. But before Tyrell could approach her, another figure entered the scene. A man, tall and wearing a baseball cap pulled low over his face, appeared from the other side of the park. He moved with a strange kind of purpose, his steps too slow to seem casual, too deliberate to go unnoticed. Tyrell's stomach tightened as he watched the man glance around as though checking to see if anyone was watching. He walked up to the little girl and bent down to her level, his hand slipping into his pocket as he spoke to her. Tyrell couldn't hear what the man said, but he saw the girl shrink back slightly, clutching her bunny even tighter. For a moment, Tyrell froze. He wasn't sure what to do. Was this the girl's father? Was he just a concerned adult helping her find her parents? But something about the way the man leaned in closer made Tyrell's skin crawl. The little girl shook her head, clearly uncomfortable, but the man didn't back off. Instead, he pulled something out of his pocket. Tyrell saw it glint in the sunlight and offered it to her. Candy. The man was offering her candy, and suddenly everything clicked. Tyrell had heard enough warnings at school about strangers and the dangers they pose to kids. This was no good Samaritan trying to help a lost child. This was something far more sinister. His heart pounded in his chest as he quickly surveyed the area. No one else seemed to notice what was happening. Parents were too busy chatting, and other kids were too caught up in their games to see the exchange unfolding. It was as if the entire park was oblivious to the growing danger. Tyrell knew he had to act fast, but what could he do? He was just a kid himself, barely older than the girl. He didn't have the authority or the strength to confront a grown man. Panic flashed through his mind. What if the man takes her? What if she gets hurt? Tyrell's breath caught in his throat. He needed a plan, and he needed it now. Taking a deep breath, Tyrell steadied himself and leaned forward on his bike, ready to ride toward the pair. But then, an idea struck him, a way to get the man's attention without putting himself directly in harm's way. His father had always taught him that sometimes the best way to handle a dangerous situation wasn't to dive straight in, but to create a distraction. There was a police station not too far from the park, but getting there would take time Tyrell didn't have. He looked around desperately, searching for anything he could use. That's when he noticed a small group of teenagers playing basketball on the nearby court. their shouts and laughter carrying across the park. They were older, tougher, and not the type of kids to back down from a confrontation. If Tyrell could somehow alert them without drawing attention to himself, maybe, just maybe, they'd step in. His mind raced. If he approached them outright, it might take too long to explain the situation, and the man could leave with the girl at any moment. Instead, Tyrell made a split-second decision. He kicked his bike into motion, heading straight for the court. As he zoomed past the basketball game, he shouted as loud as he could, "Hey, that guy over there is trying to grab that little girl." It wasn't subtle, but it worked. The teenagers stopped mid-game and turned their heads to look where Tyrell was pointing. A couple of them frowned in confusion, but one, a tall, muscular boy with a serious expression, immediately seemed to grasp the urgency of the situation. He threw the basketball down and motioned to his friends. "Yo, let's check this out," the leader of the group said, and they began jogging toward the man and the girl. Tyrell's heart raced as he watched the scene unfold. The man hadn't noticed the group approaching yet. He was too focused on convincing the little girl to take the candy. But as the teens drew closer, the man finally glanced up. His eyes widened when he saw the group headed his way, and without a word, he stuffed the candy back into his pocket and turned on his heel, walking away quickly, disappearing into the trees on the far side of the park. Relief flooded Tyrell as he saw the girl's shoulders relax. She looked confused but unharmed. The teenagers, now standing protectively around her, tried to ask if she was okay, but the girl didn't seem to understand. Tyrell pedaled slowly back to the scene, his heart still thudding in his chest. He wasn't sure if the danger had fully passed, but one thing was clear: he had done the right thing. But something told him this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. The man might be gone for now, but the little girl was still alone, and Tyrell knew they had to find her family before something else happened. As the leader of the teenagers knelt down to talk to the girl, Tyrell made a silent promise to himself. Whatever happened next, he wasn't going to let her out of his sight. The search for answers. Tyrell's mind raced as he stood beside the group of teenagers, still watching over the little girl. His pulse hadn't slowed since the man vanished into the trees, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and growing dread. The girl stood between the group of older kids, still clutching her stuffed bunny. Though the immediate danger had passed, her wide, tear-filled eyes told Tyrell that the fear hadn't. "She's probably lost," one of the teens muttered, his brow furrowed with concern. "No kidding," said another, a girl with a tight ponytail and fierce gaze. "But where's her family? Someone has to be looking for her." Tyrell could feel the weight of responsibility settling onto his shoulders. The older teens may have intervened, but they didn't seem to have a plan for what came next. Someone needed to take charge, and even though Tyrell was the youngest, he couldn't shake the feeling that it had to be him. Stepping forward, Tyrell crouched down to the girl's level. "Hey," he said softly, trying to make his voice as calming as possible. "I'm Tyrell. What's your name?" The girl sniffed, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "I'm Maya," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "That's a pretty name, Maya," Tyrell said, offering her a small smile. "Are you here with your parents? Do you know where they are?" Maya shook her head, tears welling up again. I can't find them. I was with Mommy, but then I couldn't see her anymore." Tyrell's heart ached at the sight of her trembling. He glanced up at the group of teens, all of them looking equally unsure of what to do. Tyrell knew the police would need to get involved soon, but he didn't want to scare Maya by mentioning it yet. First, they needed to figure out exactly how she got separated from her mom, and whether the man who had tried to lure her with candy had been involved from the start. "Okay, Maya," Tyrell said gently, "we're going to help you find your mom. But first, can you tell us where you last saw her?" Maya blinked through her tears, trying to remember. "She was by the ice cream truck. We were getting ice cream, And then there were so many people. I was looking at my bunny, and when I looked up, she was gone. I tried to find her, but I couldn't. Tyrell's stomach twisted. The park had been packed earlier, and it would have been easy for a small child to get separated from her parent in the crowd. But what gnawed at him was the man. Why had he approached Maya? Had he been watching her the whole time, waiting for her to be alone? He stood up, his resolve hardening. "I'm going to go look for her, Mom," he said, turning to the group of teens. "Can one of you stay with Maya? I don't want her to be alone in case that guy comes back." The teen with the ponytail immediately stepped forward. "I'll stay," she said, her voice firm. "We won't let her out of our sight." Tyrell nodded his thanks, feeling a wave of relief. He knew Maya would be safe with the group, but that didn't solve the problem of finding her mother. He had to move quickly. Time was slipping by, and the longer Maya was missing, the harder it would be to reunite her with her mom. He hopped back on his bike, pedaling hard toward the area where the ice cream truck was parked. His mind was buzzing with possibilities. Had her mother gone to the police? Was she searching the park in a panic, wondering if her daughter had been taken? Tyrell swallowed the lump in his throat, trying to shake the dark thoughts. The ice cream truck came into view, still surrounded by parents and children lining up for treats. Tyrell scanned the crowd, looking for anyone who seemed frantic or upset, but everyone appeared calm. He spotted the vendor, a middle-aged man in a white apron, handing out cones with a practiced smile. Tyrell pulled up beside the truck, catching the man's attention. "Excuse me," Tyrell said breathlessly. "Did you see a little girl here earlier? Her name's Maya. She got separated from her mom. I think she was wearing a pink dress." The vendor scratched his chin thoughtfully. "Yeah, I remember her. Cute kid. She was here with her mom about an hour ago, but I didn't notice anything strange." The mom ordered 2 cones, and then they walked off toward the playground. Tyrell's heart sank. That had to be when Maya got lost. If her mom had gone to the playground, she probably realized too late that Maya had wandered off. But why hadn't she come back to the ice cream truck to look for her? Did the mom seem worried or upset? Tyrell asked, hoping for a clue. The vendor shook his head. "Not that I noticed. She seemed fine when they left." Tyrell thanked the man and rode off again, heading toward the playground. His mind raced as he tried to piece together the timeline. Maya's mom must have lost sight of her somewhere between the ice cream truck and the playground. But there had to be more to the story. Was it possible that the man who had approached Maya had been watching her the whole time, waiting for her to be alone? The thought made Tyrell shudder. As he reached the playground, Tyrell's eyes darted around, looking for any signs of Maya's mother. He saw kids on the swings, parents chatting on benches, and toddlers stumbling around the jungle gym, but no one who seemed to be looking for a missing child. Frustration bubbled up inside him. The park was big, and without knowing where Maya's mom had gone, finding her was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Tyrell pulled out his phone, his fingers shaking slightly as he debated whether to call the police. He didn't want to jump to conclusions, but he also didn't want to waste any more time. Suddenly, a voice behind him made him freeze. "You looking for someone?" Tyrell turned to see a man standing a few feet away, his hands stuffed into the pockets of his jacket. He was tall, with unkempt hair and a scruffy beard. Something about the way he stood, too casual, too confident, set Tyrell on edge. "Yeah," Tyrell said cautiously. "I'm looking for a little girl's mom. She got separated from her." The man's lips curved into a slow, unsettling smile. "Oh, I see. That's too bad. Little kids can get lost so easily these days, can't they?" Tyrell's heart hammered in his chest. The man's voice was friendly, almost too friendly, but his eyes told a different story. They were cold, calculating, like someone who was sizing him up. Tyrell felt a chill run down his spine. "Yeah," Tyrell replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm just trying to help her out." The man took a step closer, his smile never fading. "That's nice of you, kid. But you know, sometimes it's better to let the professionals handle things like this. Maybe you should go home and let the authorities take over. Tyrell's grip tightened on the handlebars of his bike. The man was trying to scare him off, and Tyrell knew it. But why? What did he know about Maya's situation? A terrible thought flashed through Tyrell's mind. Could this be the same man who had tried to lure Maya with candy? His legs tensed, ready to pedal away if the situation got worse. He had to stay calm, had to think clearly. There was something off about this man, but Tyrell wasn't about to back down. Not now, when Maya's safety was on the line. "I'll let the police handle it," Tyrell said, his voice firm, "after I find her mom." The man's smile faltered for a split second, his eyes narrowing ever so slightly. He didn't respond, but the tension between them hung heavy in the air. Tyrell could feel it, thick and suffocating, as if he were standing on the edge of something dangerous. He had no idea what this man's connection to Maya was, but one thing was certain. Tyrell had to be careful. Without waiting for a response, Tyrell pushed off on his bike and rode away, his heart thudding in his chest. He didn't look back, but he could feel the man's eyes on him, watching him go. As he pedaled toward the other side of the park, Tyrell's mind raced. There was something more going on here, something bigger than just a lost child. But what? And who was the man? All Tyrell knew was that Maya was in danger and time was running out. A dangerous encounter. Tyrell's thoughts raced as he sped away from the unsettling man, his heart pounding with every pedal. His mind replayed the conversation over and over, trying to make sense of the man's cryptic words. Maybe you should go home and let the authorities handle it. Why would he say that? And why did it feel like a threat? He glanced over his shoulder, half expecting to see the man following him. But the path behind him was clear. The park was beginning to thin out as families packed up their picnic blankets and kids dragged their feet, reluctant to leave their playground games. But Tyrell wasn't ready to go home, not until he knew Maya was safe. He pulled up to the basketball court where Maya and the group of teens were still waiting. The girl with the ponytail, who had introduced herself as Jasmine, was sitting on the bench with Maya, trying to keep her calm. The other teens stood nearby, casting nervous glances around the park. Tyrell could see the concern etched on their faces, and he knew they were just as anxious as he was. "Any luck?" Jasmine asked as Tyrell approached. Tyrell shook his head, frustration gnawing at him. "I talked to the ice cream vendor, but no one's seen her mom. I checked the playground too. Nothing." Jasmine sighed, running a hand through her hair. "This is getting weird. Someone should have come looking for her by now. It's been, what, almost an hour?" Tyrell's stomach twisted. She was right. In a park this size, a lost child's parents should have been frantically searching, asking people if they had seen a little girl in a pink dress, but there had been no sign of Maya's mother anywhere. Maya sat quietly on the bench, hugging her stuffed bunny, her wide eyes fixed on the ground. The teens had done their best to keep her entertained, but Tyrell could tell she was starting to realize that something was very wrong. He crouched down in front of her, trying to catch her eye. "Maya, are you sure your mom didn't tell you to wait somewhere if you got lost?" he asked gently. "Maybe she went to look for you somewhere else." Maya shook her head, her bottom lip trembling. "No, I was just getting my ice cream. And then there were so many people. I didn't hear Mommy, and when I looked, she was gone. I tried to find her, but I couldn't." Tyrell's heart sank. The poor girl was scared and confused, and the longer they waited, the more hopeless the situation felt. But there was something else gnawing at him, something that had been bothering him since he left the playground. "I think someone else might be involved," Tyrell said quietly, standing up and addressing the group. "When I was checking the playground, this guy came up to me. He said I should let the police handle it. But, I don't know, something about him didn't feel right." The teens exchanged uneasy glances. "What did he look like?" Jasmine asked, her brow furrowing. Tyrell hesitated, trying to recall the man's features. He was tall, kinda scruffy, with a beard. He didn't look like anyone I'd seen before, but he was acting really weird. I think he might know something about what's going on. Jasmine's eyes narrowed. Wait a minute. Are you saying you think that guy had something to do with Maya being lost? Tyrell shrugged, frustration bubbling up again. I don't know. But I do know that he was too interested in what I was doing. It's like he wanted me to back off. Man, this just keeps getting creepier, one of the other teens muttered, crossing his arms. Shouldn't we call the police? Jasmine asked, looking at Tyrell. I mean, if this guy is involved, we can't handle this on our own. Tyrell nodded slowly. He had been reluctant to involve the police earlier, thinking they could find Maya's mom on their own. But now, with the strange man lurking in the background and no sign of Maya's mother, it was clear they were in over their heads. Yeah, Tyrell said, pulling out his phone. I think we have to. Just as he was about to dial, the hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. A shadow loomed over them, and Tyrell looked up to see the same scruffy man from the playground standing a few feet away, his eyes locked on Maya. I wouldn't do that if I were you, kid. Tyrell's hand froze mid-dial. The man's voice was calm, almost too calm, but there was a coldness beneath it that sent a shiver down Tyrell's spine. The teens around him stiffened, their eyes darting between Tyrell and the man. Jasmine stood up slowly, positioning herself between Maya and the stranger. What do you want? She demanded, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. The man smirked, taking a step closer. Relax, I'm not here to cause any trouble. I just think you kids are getting yourselves involved in something you don't understand. Tyrell's fists clenched at his sides. We're trying to help Maya find her mom. Why do you care? The man's eyes flicked to Maya, then back to Tyrell. You don't need to worry about that anymore. Her mom's been taken care of. A chill swept through the group, and Tyrell's blood ran cold. Taken care of. What did that mean? The way the man said it, so casually, so matter-of-factly, made Tyrell's stomach turn. What do you mean, taken care of? Jasmine asked, her voice laced with suspicion. The man shrugged, his smirk never fading. Let's just say she won't be a problem anymore. So why don't you kids run along and let the professionals handle this? Tyrell's heart pounded in his chest. This man knew something, and whatever it wasn't good. He could feel the danger creeping closer with every word the man spoke. He glanced at Maya, who was staring at the stranger with wide, frightened eyes. No, he wasn't going to let this happen. Not to Maya. Tyrell stepped forward, his fists clenched. We're not going anywhere until we know Maya is safe. The man's smirk faltered, just for a moment, before it returned, colder than before. You're a brave kid, I'll give you that, but bravery won't do you much good here. Tyrell's pulse quickened as the man took another step forward. He could feel the tension rising around him, like a coiled spring ready to snap. The other teens were on edge, their eyes darting between the man and each other, waiting for someone to make the first move. And then, without warning, the man lunged. It happened so fast that Tyrell barely had time to react. One moment the man was standing there, smirking, and the next he was charging toward Maya, his hand reaching out to grab her. But Tyrell was quicker. In an instant, Tyrell jumped in front of the man, blocking his path to Maya. He shoved the man with all his might, sending him stumbling back a few steps. The man's eyes blazed with fury, and Tyrell braced himself for the worst. But before the man could recover, Jasmine stepped in. Get away from her, she shouted, her voice strong and commanding. The other teens quickly surrounded Maya, forming a protective circle around her. The man's eyes flickered with anger, but he didn't make another move. Instead, he glared at Tyrell, his lip curling in disgust. You're making a big mistake, kid. Tyrell's breath came in short, sharp bursts as he stared the man down. Leave. Now. For a moment, the man didn't move. Tyrell could feel the weight of his gaze, the silent threat hanging in the air. But then, with a low growl of frustration, the man turned on his heel and stormed off, disappearing into the shadows of the park. Tyrell didn't relax until the man was completely out of sight. His knees felt weak, and his heart was still pounding in his chest, but he couldn't let his guard down yet. There was still too much at stake. Jasmine let out a shaky breath. What the hell was that? Tyrell shook his head, trying to steady his breathing. I don't know, but whatever it is, we can't let our guard down. The group huddled closer together, their eyes scanning the park for any sign of the man. Tyrell's mind was racing. What did he mean by taken care of? Was Maya's mom really in danger, or was the man just trying to scare them off? And why was he so interested in Maya? Tyrell glanced down at Maya, who was still clutching her stuffed bunny, her eyes wide with fear. He knelt down beside her, offering her a reassuring smile. Don't worry, Maya. We won't let anything happen to you. But as he said the words, a knot of dread tightened in his chest. The man might be gone for now, but Tyrell knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The missing link. Tyrell sat on the curb just outside the park, his breathing finally slowing after the tense standoff. Jasmine and the other teens huddled around Maya, trying to distract her from the scare, but her wide eyes and trembling hands betrayed her fear. Tyrell's mind was spinning with questions, none of which had answers yet. Why had the man targeted Maya? What did he mean by taken care of? And why hadn't anyone else stepped in to help? As the sky began to glow with the fading light of the late afternoon sun, Tyrell knew they couldn't stay at the park much longer. The creepy man might have disappeared, but he could still be lurking nearby, watching their every move. The longer they stayed out in the open, the more vulnerable they were. But going home without finding Maya's mom didn't sit right with Tyrell either. The knot in his stomach tightened as he realized just how serious things had become. Tyrell took out his phone, his hand shaking as he stared at the screen. His thumb hovered over the number for the police. It wasn't that he didn't trust them. He knew they were trained to handle situations like this. But something in his gut told him that involving the authorities would put Maya at even greater risk. That man knew something about her mother, and he seemed determined to keep them from finding her. Calling the police might only make things worse. But he couldn't just sit here, waiting for answers to fall from the sky. They needed a plan, and fast. Jasmine walked over to him, her expression tense. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Tyrell shook his head, staring at the ground. "I don't know, but we can't stay here. It's too dangerous." Jasmine bit her lip, glancing back at Maya, who was now curled up on the bench with her stuffed bunny. "We can't just leave her either. That guy, he's still out there." "I know," Tyrell said, frustration lacing his words. "But if we call the cops, they might not get here fast enough. And who knows what that guy will do if he sees them. We need to find Maya's mom, before he does." Jasmine sighed, rubbing her temples. "How though? We've searched the whole park, and no one's seen her." Tyrell stared off into the distance, his mind racing. They had already checked all the obvious places, playgrounds, benches, picnic areas. Yet Maya's mother was nowhere to be found. There had to be something they were missing, something that connected the strange man to her disappearance. He thought back to the man's words. Taken care of. The way he said it wasn't just casual. It was like a threat. But what did it mean? Was Maya's mom hurt? Was she somewhere nearby, unable to call for help? Tyrell's chest tightened at the thought. Suddenly, an idea hit him like a bolt of lightning. What if he's hiding her somewhere in the park? Jasmine blinked, taken aback. "What do you mean?" Tyrell jumped to his feet, excitement bubbling up inside him. "Think about it. He's been watching us this whole time, right? He knew exactly when to show up and tell me to leave it to the authorities. What if he's been keeping an eye on Maya's mom this whole time too? What if he's hiding her somewhere close by, waiting for us to give up and go home?" Jasmine's eyes widened as she considered the possibility. That would explain why he's so desperate to keep us from looking. If he's got her somewhere in the park, he doesn't want anyone to find her. But where could he be hiding her? One of the other teens asked, looking around nervously. The park's big, but there aren't that many places to hide someone. Tyrell's mind whirred as he tried to think of every nook and cranny in the park. He had spent countless hours here, but he had never thought about it from the perspective of someone trying to conceal something or someone. Then it hit him. The old maintenance shed. Tyrell blurted out. It's tucked behind the trees at the far edge of the park. No one goes there anymore because it's been abandoned for years. Jasmine's eyes lit up. That's perfect. It's hidden enough that no one would think to check, but it's close enough that he could keep an eye on everything going on in the park. Tyrell nodded, his pulse quickening. We need to check it out. If she's there, we'll call the police, but at least we'll know she's safe. Jasmine hesitated, glancing back at Maya. What about her? We can't leave her alone. Tyrell thought for a moment before turning to one of the other teens, a tall boy with dark curly hair. Ryan, can you stay here with Maya? We'll be back as soon as we can. Ryan nodded, his expression serious. You got it. Just be careful. Okay. Tyrell gave him a grateful nod before turning to Jasmine. Let's go. The two of them started jogging toward the far end of the park, weaving through the trees and ducking under low-hanging branches. The maintenance shed was barely visible from the main path, hidden behind a thick grove of trees that shielded it from prying eyes. Tyrell's heart raced as they approached the dilapidated building, its paint peeling and windows boarded up. The closer they got, the more uneasy Tyrell felt. The shed looked like it hadn't been used in years, but there was something off about it, something that made the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. He slowed to a stop just a few feet away from the door, his breath coming in short, shallow gasps. You think she's in there? Jasmine asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Tyrell swallowed hard. Only one way to find out. He stepped forward, his hand trembling as he reached for the door. It was locked, but the wood was old and brittle. With a hard shove, Tyrell forced the door open, the hinges creaking loudly in the quiet air. The inside of the shed was dark, the only light coming from a small, cracked window near the ceiling. Dust floated in the air, and the smell of damp wood filled Tyrell's nostrils. Jasmine grabbed his arm, her grip tight. Do you hear that? Tyrell strained his ears, listening intently. At first, all he could hear was the sound of his own breathing. But then, faintly, he caught the sound of something, a soft, muffled whimper coming from the back of the shed. His heart skipped a beat. Maya's mom, he whispered. Without thinking, Tyrell bolted toward the sound, his eyes scanning the dark corners of the shed. At the very back, behind a stack of old crates, he found her. A woman with long, dark hair, tied up and gagged, her eyes wide with terror. She's here, Tyrell shouted over his shoulder to Jasmine, who rushed over to help. Together, they worked quickly to untie the woman's restraints, her hands shaking as they freed her from the ropes. Are you okay? Jasmine asked, her voice soft as she removed the gag from the woman's mouth. Maya's mother nodded, tears streaming down her face. I'm okay now. Thank you. Thank you so much. Tyrell felt a rush of relief wash over him as he helped her to her feet. But the moment was short-lived. From outside the shed, he heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps, approaching fast. Tyrell, Jasmine whispered, her voice filled with fear. He's coming. Tyrell's blood ran cold. The man had found them. They had to get out of there. Now. Without another word, Tyrell grabbed Maya's mother's hand and pulled her toward the door. Jasmine followed close behind, her eyes darting toward the shed's entrance. They could hear the man's voice now, low and menacing, calling out to them as he drew nearer. You think you can hide from me? The man taunted, his footsteps growing louder with each passing second. You can't run forever. Tyrell's heart pounded in his chest as he led them out the back of the shed, hoping the trees would provide enough cover to slip away unnoticed. But the man was close, too close. Tyrell could feel the panic rising in his throat, but he forced himself to stay calm. They couldn't afford to make a mistake now. Jasmine grabbed Tyrell's arm, her voice shaking. "What do we do?" Tyrell glanced back at Maya's mother, who was still trembling, her face pale with fear. He knew they didn't have much time. "We run," he said, his voice steady. "And we don't stop until we're out of the park." With that, they took off, sprinting through the trees as fast as they could. A man's voice echoed behind them, filled with anger and frustration. But Tyrell didn't look back. All he could think about was getting Maya's mother to safety. No matter what it took, a race against time. Tyrell's legs pumped hard, the adrenaline surging through his veins like a lightning bolt. The echo of footsteps, heavy, deliberate, and far too close, spurred him to move faster. Jasmine was right beside him, her face twisted in fear, but her pace never faltering. Maya's mother, though shaky, kept up as best she could, clutching Tyrell's arm with a grip that spoke volumes about her terror. Every crackle of a branch or rustle of leaves sent chills down Tyrell's spine. The man was gaining on them, his taunts growing louder, crueler. "You can't run forever, boy. I'll find you. I'll find all of you." Tyrell gritted his teeth, willing himself not to look back. He couldn't afford to waste even a second. They had to reach the park's main entrance, where Ryan was waiting with Maya. But the path ahead was littered with obstacles, fallen branches, overgrown bushes, and uneven ground that could trip them at any moment. Tyrell's mind raced, searching for a way to outsmart the man chasing them. They were faster, but he was relentless, and he clearly knew the park well. As they sprinted through the dense trees, Tyrell spotted something up ahead. A small clearing just beyond a row of tall bushes. His heart skipped a beat. That clearing was dangerously close to the road leading to the old service path. The man could easily cut them off if they weren't careful. Tyrell slowed his pace, grabbing Jasmine's arm to signal her to stop. "What is it?" Jasmine whispered, out of breath, her wide eyes scanning the area. Tyrell pointed to the bushes ahead. "We can't go that way. He might cut us off. We need a different route." Maya's mother, still clutching Tyrell's arm, gasped for air. What if we can hide?" she asked, her voice barely audible, the weight of exhaustion pressing down on her words. Tyrell looked around. Hiding seemed impossible. The trees were too thin to conceal them, and they didn't have enough time to find proper cover before the man closed in. But then something caught his eye. Just off to the right, tucked behind a row of bushes, was an old, overgrown playground, the kind nobody used anymore. It was fenced in, half hidden by vines, with an old wooden play structure that looked like it had been abandoned for years. The idea hit Tyrell like a flash. "We'll go to the playground," Tyrell whispered. "He won't expect us to stop running. If we can hide there for a minute, maybe we can throw him off." Jasmine's brow furrowed. "You really think that'll work?" "It's a chance," Tyrell said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "If we keep running, he'll catch us eventually. We need to confuse him." Maya's mother nodded weakly, her face pale but determined. She trusted Tyrell now. She had no choice. Without another word, Tyrell led them toward the playground, slipping through a gap in the old rusted fence. They crouched behind a large wooden structure, staying low and trying to control their breathing. Tyrell peeked through a crack between the boards. The man's footsteps were close now, pounding against the ground with terrifying precision. Tyrell held his breath, his heart pounding in his ears as the man's shadow appeared just beyond the bushes. He could see him now, tall, broad-shouldered, his face twisted in anger as he scanned the area. The man slowed, his eyes narrowing, as if sensing that his prey was near. "Come out, little hero," the man called out, his voice dripping with malice. "You're only making this harder on yourself. You think you're smart, but you're just a scared little boy." Tyrell clenched his fists, willing himself not to move. He could feel the tension radiating from Jasmine and Maya's mother, their bodies rigid with fear. The man took a few more steps, pausing just a few feet from the playground. He seemed to be weighing his options, his eyes darting from side to side. For a moment, it seemed like he might turn back and search elsewhere. But then, a sharp rustle in the bushes startled the man. It was a rabbit, small and harmless, but it was enough to make the man whirl around, his eyes narrowing as he stalked off in the direction of the noise. Tyrell exhaled slowly, his body sagging with relief. They had bought themselves a little time, but it wasn't over yet. "We need to move," Tyrell whispered urgently. "He'll be back. Let's head for the main path. If we can make it to the road, we're safe." Jasmine nodded, her face still pale, and Maya's mother clutched her chest, trying to steady her breathing. Together, they slipped out from behind the playground and began creeping toward the road. Tyrell led the way, his senses on high alert, every sound amplified in the silence of their escape. As they reached the edge of the trees, the park's main path came into view. Tyrell's heart leaped with hope. Ryan and Maya were just beyond that bend. They were almost there, but just as they stepped onto the path, a chilling voice cut through the air. "Not so fast." Tyrell's stomach dropped as the man emerged from the shadows, blocking their path. His face was twisted into a cruel smile, his eyes gleaming with triumph. He had circled back and cut them off, just as Tyrell had feared. Behind him, a dark car idled at the edge of the road, its engine running, its doors open. The man took a step toward them, his smile widening. "You really thought you could get away from me? How sweet." Tyrell's hands clenched into fists, his mind racing. They were out of options. The man was too close, and there was nowhere left to run. But then, as the man stepped forward, something caught Tyrell's eye. A small silver object clipped to the man's belt. It glinted in the fading light, and for a split second, Tyrell's world slowed down. A badge. The man was wearing a badge. Tyrell's mind reeled. This man wasn't just some random stranger. He was a cop. But why would a police officer be chasing them? Why had he taken Maya's mom? And why was he trying to keep them from finding her? The question swirled in Tyrell's head, but there was no time for answers. The man reached into his jacket, pulling out a pair of handcuffs, his smile never faltering. "You've caused me a lot of trouble, kid," he said, his voice low and menacing. "But it's over now." Tyrell's heart raced. He couldn't let this happen. He had come too far, fought too hard to let it end like this. And then, without thinking, Tyrell did the only thing he could. He lunged. Everything happened in a blur. Tyrell slammed into the man with all his strength, catching him off guard. The man staggered backward, his grip on the handcuffs loosening as he stumbled. Tyrell didn't stop. He grabbed the man's wrist, twisting it hard until the handcuffs clattered to the ground. The man cursed, swinging at Tyrell, but Tyrell was faster. He ducked, dodging the blow, and shoved the man again, sending him crashing into a nearby tree. Jasmine screamed, but Tyrell didn't stop. He grabbed Maya's mother and Jasmine's hands and bolted toward the road, his heart pounding in his chest. They had a chance, just a small one, but it was enough. Behind them, the man struggled to his feet, his eyes blazing with fury. He was hurt, but he wasn't done yet. Tyrell could hear him cursing, could hear the sound of his footsteps pounding against the ground as he gave chase. But they were close now, so close. As they rounded the final bend in the path, Tyrell saw Ryan and Maya standing by the park's entrance, their faces lit up with relief. Tyrell's heart soared. They had made it. "Run!" Tyrell shouted, waving his arms as they sprinted toward the road. Ryan's eyes widened as he saw them, and he quickly grabbed Maya, pulling her behind him. But just as they reached the road, the man appeared again, his face twisted with rage. He reached for his jacket, his hand hovering over something dangerous. Tyrell's stomach dropped. A gun. The man was reaching for a gun. Tyrell's mind screamed for him to run, to keep moving, but his body froze, paralyzed by fear. Time seemed to slow down as the man's hand closed around the weapon. his eyes locked on Tyrell. But then, in a flash of movement, Jasmine did something that took everyone by surprise. She stepped forward, standing between Tyrell and the man, her hands raised in defiance. "Stop," she shouted, her voice trembling but strong. "It's over." For a moment, everything was still. The man hesitated, his hand hovering over the gun, his eyes narrowing as he stared at Jasmine. And then, slowly, he lowered his hand. Tyrell exhaled, his body sagging with relief. But the danger wasn't over yet. They had to get out of there. Now. The final stand. Tyrell's heart pounded as he stared at Jasmine, her small frame standing defiantly between him and the man. The tension in the air was thick, suffocating, as if the entire world had paused, waiting for the next move. Tyrell could hardly breathe, his mind spinning in a million directions. He knew the man was armed, but Jasmine wasn't backing down. Her bravery sparked something in him, a sense of responsibility not only for himself, but for everyone around him. The man's hand still hovered near his gun, his eyes flicking between Jasmine and Tyrell. For a moment, it seemed like he might pull the trigger, but then he faltered, confused by the unwavering resolve of the young girl standing in front of him. He hadn't expected resistance like this, and that hesitation was all Tyrell needed to act. "Go," Tyrell yelled to Jasmine and Maya's mother, who was trembling just behind her. "Get Ryan and Maya to safety." Jasmine hesitated, glancing back at him with wide eyes, but Tyrell gave her a reassuring nod. "I'll handle this," he said, trying to sound braver than he felt. He wasn't sure how he'd stop this man, but he knew one thing. He couldn't let this end in violence, not after coming so far. Jasmine nodded, her voice shaking but determined. "Be careful, Tyrell." She turned, pulling Maya's mother by the hand, and they sprinted toward Ryan and Maya, who were waiting just beyond the park's entrance. As they ran, Tyrell turned his full attention to the man. His mind raced, searching for a way to end this without anyone getting hurt. The man, however, didn't seem willing to let them go so easily. His hand dropped to his side, resting on the gun, and his eyes hardened. "You think you're smart, don't you, kid?" The man sneered, his voice low and venomous. "But you're in way over your head." Tyrell's muscles tensed. The man took a step forward, his face twisted in anger. Tyrell could see the conflict in his eyes. He was losing control, and that made him dangerous. But Tyrell wasn't about to back down now. He had made it this far, and he wasn't going to let fear stop him. He knew he had to stay calm, keep his wits about him, and figure out a way to defuse the situation. "You don't have to do this," Tyrell said, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. "It's over. The police are on their way. You won't get away with this." The man's lips curled into a sneer. "Police." He let out a short, humorless laugh. "You think they'll stop me? I am the police, boy." The words sent a chill down Tyrell's spine, but he didn't let it show. Instead, he held the man's gaze, refusing to back down. He could see the desperation in the man's eyes now, the way his hand trembled slightly as it hovered near the gun. This wasn't just about him trying to hurt Maya's mom or take them down. Something deeper was at play, something that had driven the man to act this way. But whatever it was, Tyrell knew they had to survive. Just as Tyrell was about to respond, a blaring siren pierced the air. The man's head snapped up, his eyes darting toward the park's entrance where a patrol car came screeching to a halt. The flashing red and blue lights illuminated the scene, casting an eerie glow over the darkening park. Tyrell felt a wave of relief wash over him, but he knew the situation was still volatile. The man cursed under his breath, his hand now gripping the gun tightly. Tyrell's stomach lurched as he realized the man might make a desperate move. The officers, still a distance away, were shouting commands, but it was clear they hadn't yet realized how dangerous the situation was. Tyrell's mind raced. If the man drew his gun now, someone could get hurt. Him, the officers, or even the people he was trying to protect. He had to think fast. And then, in a flash of inspiration, Tyrell remembered the training his older cousin had taught him during self-defense lessons, a way to disarm someone without putting yourself in immediate danger. It was risky, but it was the only chance he had. As the man took a step back, his eyes flicking nervously between Tyrell and the approaching officers, Tyrell sprang into action. Without warning, he darted forward, grabbing the man's wrist in one swift motion. The man reacted instinctively, trying to pull the gun free, but Tyrell twisted his wrist sharply, just as his cousin had shown him. The gun clattered to the ground, and in the same fluid motion, Tyrell shoved the man backward with all his strength. The man stumbled, caught off guard by Tyrell's sudden move. Tyrell kicked the gun away, sending it skidding across the pavement just as the officers reached them. The man let out a roar of frustration, but it was too late. The police descended on him, tackling him to the ground and quickly restraining him. Tyrell stumbled back, his chest heaving, his body shaking with adrenaline. He watched as the officers cuffed the man, his face pressed into the dirt, his angry shouts muffled by the sound of sirens. It was over. Finally, it was over. Tyrell exhaled, his legs feeling like jelly beneath him. He had done it. He had saved Maya's mother and Jasmine and Ryan. He had stopped the man before anyone could get hurt. As the officers pulled the man to his feet and began leading him away, one of them approached Tyrell, a look of admiration on his face. "You did good, kid," the officer said, clapping Tyrell on the shoulder. "You're a real hero." Tyrell shook his head, feeling a wave of exhaustion wash over him. "I'm not a hero," he said quietly. "I just did what I had to do." The officer smiled. "That's what makes you a hero." As the police led the man toward their car, Tyrell turned and saw Jasmine, Ryan, Maya, and her mother standing by the park's entrance, their faces filled with relief and gratitude. Maya's mother ran toward Tyrell, tears streaming down her face as she pulled him into a tight embrace. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "You saved my life. You saved all of us." Tyrell hugged her back, feeling a lump form in his throat. He wasn't sure what to say, so he just nodded, letting the warmth of her gratitude wash over him. As Maya's mother pulled away, Jasmine and Ryan rushed forward, wrapping their arms around Tyrell in a tight hug. For a moment, they all just stood there, holding each other, the weight of what had just happened settling in. "I'm so glad you're okay," Jasmine whispered, her voice shaky but filled with relief. Tyrell smiled, feeling a sense of peace settle over him. "We all are." As they walked toward the flashing lights of the police cars, Tyrell felt a strange sense of calm. He had faced his fear, protected the people he cared about, and even though the day had been filled with terror and danger, it had also shown him something important. That courage wasn't about not being afraid. It was about standing up in the face of fear, even when everything inside you screamed to run. And as they walked away from the park that day, Tyrell knew that he had found something deeper inside himself, a strength he hadn't known he possessed, and a courage that would stay with him for the rest of his life.